all these people rushing to get, you know, RTX 3080. That's not where your bottleneck is in your GPU. This is just a GTX 970. You know, RTX is probably 3 times performance of this card. Well, probably more. The bottleneck is definitely the CPU. So my focus is going to be on CPU rather than GPU. You know, probably 370. 370 will be adequate. Why pay $800? Why pay $800 for a 3080? I'm sure it's 800. Is it 699? 799, 699, $700 for a 380 when a 37 Super or 37 costs $500, and it'd be just as good in terms of what you're going to get out of it. You know, what's the point of paying extra for the GPU and the bottlenecks with the CPU to get the maximum best CPU you can afford, most cores, highest single core performance and more cores, so you get both. This is maxed out at 10%, 12% usage, and it's not even ramped up to the top. It's not even ramped up to the maximum, which would be around 3600 megahertz on the memory and I think 1340 on the clock. So the CPU is not even maxed out and it's already 13%. So that's about 9% of the maximum. Utilization is 9% of max. My CPU is 100%. Again, do not make the mistake of over prioritizing your GPU due to the mania, the GPU mania. Currently we're in the GPU mania. Once upon a time it was CPU mania. Maybe the CPU mania will come back. Well, CPU is what you need to focus on because that's what your bottleneck's going to be. And now we've got this PCI Express 4 mania. Look, these cards work adequate. A GTX 390 and SLI would work virtually the same on the PCI 3 than PCI 4. So if that twin card SLI, what are you messing about with one card? You know, the bus will be split on a 3090 to 8-bit, 8 lanes from 16. So if 8 lanes is adequate, why are you worrying about PCI Express 4? People get caught up by the sales pitches, especially where the GPUs are concerned. AMD is going to come out with their sales pitch for Big Navi, more like Big Nappy. So then the bottlenecks is with the CPUs. So I'm definitely going to get the most powerful GPU I can afford, which will probably be the Zen3 5900x. That's primary. Secondary will be looking at CPU. It'll probably be a 3070 Super, or I might just get a 3080 for future proofing. Though I want more memory. You know, 10 gig VRAM. That's not so good. I'll probably go for a 3070 with 16 gig RAM. That's better. You know, so with 16 gig RAM, 3070, then a 3080 with 10 gig RAM, VRAM. But CPU is priority, because that's where the bottlenecking occurs, not with the GPU. As you can see, 100%. Well, CPU is just skating along, hardly used, hardly being used. This 10% is not even of the max, not even maxed out. Yeah, for gaming you need a GPU, but even then you're going to be bottlenecked by most games by your CPU long before you get to GPU. For most games the bottlenecking is barely, yeah, it depends on your resolution. If you're 4K, then yeah, GPU bottlenecking is more likely before CPU. But most people game at 1080p for fast frame rate, and there the bottlenecking, no matter how good your GPU is, will be the CPU, not GPU, be the CPU. Even 4040p, you know, people wasting money on a 3090, 3080, you're going to be bottlenecked by your CPU. So get either a 10900K 10 core or 3900X if you can get it cheap, 3950X, but I would go for the max, which would be in a few days time the 5950X 16 core running at 5 gigahertz on at least one core, maybe 2 or 3. That will be my system build PC, so that I don't get bottlenecked. People, they're obsessed with, well, like it is, people get caught up with the sales pitch media, all the other YouTubers going crazy over the 3990 because they get free 3080s and 3090s, so they're going crazy over the RTX. Well, what do you expect? They've got it for free. They're going to pump out hundreds of videos of garbage sales pitch building the mania, when actually for most people they should be focused on the CPU, not the GPU. And there we got finished rendering the video and everything's dialing back toward normal. The clock speed on the GPU is going to drop soon, as will the temperature. There it goes, idling now. GPU usage just 1%, CPU 11, it's idle. So take this as a learning experience, so not get caught up by the GPU mania. Your bottleneck will not be your GPU, even if it's old like this one, GTX 970. You know, you're going to be bottlenecked by the CPU long before you're bottlenecked by the GPU. You know, now idling at 50%. So all these tabs have got open. Well, so GPU is sleeping once more, gone back into sleep mode. 1%, 2% utilization. Yeah, so again, the system I would focus on now is to maximize your GPU, which in this age means a 5950X. Go for it, pay the extra, save on the rest, save on your GPU, forget the 3080. In fact, the 3060 might be adequate. You want more VRAM, so 16 gig 3060, which I presume will be $400 roughly. 360 Super, 400, maybe $350. That would go well with the system today. Then a 3080, which is overkill. $700. Yeah, it sounds like you're good, you gain the maximum, but if you cut corners on your CPU, then you're just wasting your money because you're not going to use it. Do you get me? If you got, say, 9900K or a 3600X or a 3800X and you get a 3080, you're not going to be able to use it because you're going to be bottlenecked by your CPU. You might as well get the best CPU you can afford, which in a few days will be the 5950X, and then think about your graphics card. In fact, you might not even, if you got a 2080 Ti or 2080 Super or 2080, you know, then you might not even need to get a new GPU. It's adequate. That would be fine with a 5950X 2080 Super.